So let's begin game 2. This is what the game is codenamed King Birdseed. And first things first, always check what your opponent did. So our Russian opener is 4 infantry, 3 artillery. Pretty standard. What looks like a terrible Ukraine is actually a fantastic Ukraine. He actually killed everything but 1 and then retreated. So he only lost infantry. And then he also took West Russia and lost a little bit above average, lost 4 infantry there. So Russia's pretty strong. Moved 1 over to Shankiang. And then he's got an interesting block of 7 infantry right here in the Soviet Far East. That's going to complicate things a little bit. Normally you see those go west. He did drop his sub to help the British out. So overall, fairly standard turn 1 with Russia. Looks like he had pretty good luck. Now for Germany, what we're going to do this game is just play absolutely as stock standard as possible. That means max out our infantry buy and then spend your change on artillery. Now the way that he set this up, I'm actually unable to land everything I want on Karelia. So I'm going to have to take that light. Meanwhile, have to take that C-zone. So in this case, I'm going to run 6-0, and I'm just going to take all the naval units I can, drop only 1 infantry into Karelia, and now we can start shifting our focus down to the Mediterranean. So standard play is going to be take out that destroyer. We're going to take the transport, take an artillery, and an infantry. In this case, we'll take the infantry from Italy. That gives us a little bit more stuff pushing east later. And we'll just knock out Transjordan. Transjordan is going to block the strait and prevent this UK fleet from moving up and getting aggressive in the Mediterranean. And it kind of cordons off Africa for our advance later. So with that, we'll lock it in. Always do a quick skim, little review, see if we forgot something. Implausible, amphibious assaults are always going to register as implausible, so overall, that's pretty good. We'll take a look and see what our dice look like. In this case, C-zone, sea combat always comes first. Battleship's very, very likely to win. Starts with a miss. Knock it out, that destroyer. Even if he hits, doesn't matter. Battleships can take 2. So that went precisely as expected. No real surprises here. Follow up with the Amphibious Combat. This would be another one that we expect to win. You could lose, but it's possible, but fairly unlikely. And then C-zone, I played it very safe here, and I took literally everything I could. A lot of times you'll branch off other subs or something to different C-zones, try and play greedy, but in this case I played very conservative just in case he hits everything. So I've got 3 submarines here. Only 2 hits, which isn't great, and he gets 2 hits in return. So actually this is a case where I need all of these things on offense to be able to survive. So there's an interesting trade-off. If he's losing his destroyer, I could take the cruiser instead, try and get that first shot advantage, but I think I'll keep the more likely hit instead. Another couple of misses, only 1 hit on the counterattack. He takes out another ship, and he's still not dead yet, so finally, this is one of those cases where had I not put 6 units in that C-zone, I would have lost that fight, and I would be on my back foot for the rest of the game. So there's our combat summary. Overall, netting positive for Germany, and that's a pretty good, strong first move. Now we look at non-combat, and one of the first considerations is where to locate the fighters. Generally, Northwestern Europe is a really strong spot. France is a really strong spot. Finland is a really strong spot. All of these are going to help me dead zone C-zone 7 and discourage the United Kingdom from getting a large fleet. So, going to take all my tanks, find a home for them. In this case, I can't put them on Karelia, so we're just going to relocate our entire armor battalion to Baltic states, which will allow me to attack through Karelia. I've also got to find a home for this transport. Not entirely sure how I want to use that. I can just pull 2 infantry from Finland or something, drop them on Baltic states. I mean, their net destination is Karelia anyway, so this transport doesn't make too much of a difference. Meanwhile, just dropping all of these fighters on northwestern Europe so that I can have a big pile of 5 fighters, actually 6 fighters because my Ukrainian fighter's still alive, and that will help discourage the United Kingdom from getting a fleet turn 1. Gonna have light infantry on the front. All my other infantry going to Baltic states. My goal is that Karelia is mine next turn. I'm going to put everything I possibly can on Karelia next turn. Should be a fairly straightforward grab the industry, start producing, shifting my anti-air guns up, and at this point all the arrows are crisscrossing. I'm starting to get a little bit cross-eyed, but that's why we have our summary screens at the end of the turn to help keep us from forgetting things. So I'm checking, do I have enough ground on Northwest Europe? In this case, I'm going to have 1 infantry, 1 anti-air gun have moved out, so I can take 1 more infantry. I want to end this turn with 2 infantry in there. With the interface, sometimes it's a little confusing what's there versus what's coming in. So, because I'm wary that if I have all of my planes there and only 1 shield protecting, he might drop a tank and an infantry, 2 fighters and a bomber, and just suicide all his UK stuff to try and take some German planes away, and that trade would probably end up favoring UK. So we'll do a quick review. Northwest Europe, we're ending with 2 infantry, 6 fighters. France, we're leaving empty. Italy, empty. Baltic states has got a giant army. Everything else is pretty straightforward here. Libya added a couple things. So if he was feeling suicidal, he might be able to take Libya, but that would be not a great idea. We'll drop the artillery on Germany because odds are we're losing our battleship and transport next turn. And we'll fill in with infantry to the south, and that maxes out our production. And that is a pretty solid turn 1, honestly. Income of 42. Life is looking pretty good for the Axis. Let's see how this develops. Alright, here we are a day later. Japan's turn 1. First things first, always see what your opponent did. In this case, we have a carrier and a fighter, which is a non-traditional purchase for UK1. Normally you'd get a destroyer, add another hit point to protect against this pile of German fighters, as is this pile of German fighters is probably going to be able to remove that fleet in C-Zone 7 without issue. He placed that additional fighter in India. What did he do for combat? So he took out my transport in the Baltic, no surprises there. He went for Borneo, and he went for New Guinea. Won one of those combats, lost the other. Most notably, he did not in any way actually attack my battleship. Now, he took out Japan's transport and destroyer in C-Zone 61, tried to pull a cheeky move and test whether I had submerge on my defense profile. Spoilers, I did. And lost 1 destroyer in trying to retake C-Zone 7. My cruiser did roll a hit on the return fire, so that is unfortunate for him, and one of the reasons why he probably should have arguably bought a destroyer. So Germany gets to keep its transport in the Mediterranean, but it is Japan's turn, so we are going to start with a classic 3 transports, as well as an infantry and a tank. Normally you might hear 3 infantry, but in this case I'm going to attempt an early timing attack on India, and we are going to see what develops from that. As far as our combat moves, we want to clear all these UK ships out, and we want to retake Borneo if it's at all possible. So we need to be careful in how we distribute our fighters. In this case, we're landing 2 fighters on the island. Battleship carrier going to help me take out that cruiser. We'll gently take Buryatia to the north, and we can also start getting to work on China. The real pain here is kind of how to distribute the fighters and where these fighters are going to end up. I am deliberately not going to take Burma because anything I put there is going to get captured very quickly, and I only have 1 transport right this moment. And I would prefer to spare as many ground units as I can for now. I'm only getting 1 income out of that. Dropping a battleship down to help me neutralize that carrier. And then I've got these other fighters to consider. I want to guarantee my odds of survival down in these sea zones, because it would be really awkward if United Kingdom still had a cruiser at the end of this adventure. So we're sending the bomber down to help out off of New Guinea. And then right now I'm thinking about, what am I going to do about Borneo? Could take the cruiser down to that sea zone, because what if the battleship misses? What if he misses twice? Then there's the whole, what if the United States takes 3 fighters down and tries to suicide in the range of the carrier and punish my battleship? So I'm just trying to play as conservative as possible and maximize my odds of survival. 1 battleship feels light. Could take a fighter, could take a destroyer, but I really want to take that ground in China. That should be a pretty good combat move overall. So we will end phase, we'll review, always review, and we realize, oh, there's no ground units in Borneo. So we need to send some ground units over. So we're going to grab our transport, pick up an artillery, pick up an infantry, and send those down there to take care of business. 2 fighters, 2 infantry versus 2 infantry. That's pretty good odds overall. It says unlikely, but that's what the game's going to tell you for any amphibious combat. Make sure I'm not doing something else really stupid either. And we should be good to roll. Let's resolve our naval combat and amphibious assaults first. This case should be fairly straightforward battle. Cruiser nails the hit. Even if he gets the counterattack, doesn't matter. Battleships take 2 hits. Another win in the name of the Empire of Japan. Then we can go to the actual land battle. This one should also be, hopefully, cross fingers, fairly straightforward. If he does get 2 out of 2 hits, that's going to be unfortunate, but fortunately only hits 1. Life is good. The roulette wheel is not against us today. So Borneo went well. Then we'll just kind of take the combats as they come to us. We'll resolve this last sea zone, see what goes on here. Sub misses. That's unfortunate, but at least one of the planes gets the hit. So cruiser goes down, and not only that, I get to keep my sub. So coin flip in my favor there. Let's knock this carrier out once and for all. He defends on a 2. It's pretty unlikely that he's going to be able to kill this battleship, especially if I hit first. 1 more easy combat. Really strange that he chose to lose the fighter in that combat. You'd think he'd lose the carrier and then land the fighter somewhere safely. So let's see how these ground battles go. In this case, miss, 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 miss. But he missed 2, so that's okay. So fairly clean capture of that territory. Immaculate, really, if all you're looking at is the end stats. Then Yunnan. This one should go fairly straightforward as well. Hopefully he doesn't hit 2. That would be awkward. He's got nothing. He does tag 1, but I'm okay with 1. 1 is an acceptable loss here. All he has to attack with is 2 infantry, 1 fighter, and that's just not going to cut it against 4 2s. So, non-combat move, we take our aircraft carrier north. The USA will be able to take some fighters there, so we'll need something to be able to defend those new transports that we're purchasing. Land the fighters from Borneo on the sea zone, and we can stack all these other planes as well as the 1 infantry we left behind over here. Although, 1 will probably need to land on that carrier. We'll probably divvy 1 off again back later. Take our Malaya infantry, move him north. Destroyer's probably going to stay right where he's at. We didn't purchase any fighters, but we purchased 3 transports, and we need to keep them safe. So, just trying to figure out which fighter we're going to send and how many. So we're going to take the one from the New Guinea Sea Zone, drop him in there. So now that's 1 destroyer, 1 fighter, 1 carrier. USA would be able to bring 1, 2, 3. They could bring a fighter. They could bring 2 fighters, potentially. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. They could bring 2 fighters, one from China, one from the sea zone, but they would not be able to bring 3. So that should be a fairly robust defense. Should be good. So we drop our transports in the water, we drop our ground on the one island we have that can produce anything, and we are going to call that a turn for Japan. Once again, back to Germany. Always, always, always check and see what your opponent did before you commit to your own purchases and moves. So USA bought 1 carrier, 3 transports, and a couple of ground. Where did they go? They went east. So this is no pressure against Japan. This is pressure against Germany. So he's going pretty hardcore, kind of kill Germany first, is what it looks like his strategy is. No combat. Didn't attack anything. What did he do with his Asian infantry? Moved those back to Kazakh. Took his fighter. Stacked that on India. Where did he put his fleet? So he moved those forward. He didn't try to feed those through. He put those off the coast of Wake Island. And not only that, but he's got 2 infantry sitting inside that transport, just waiting for something fun to happen. So, threatening to take the Philippines, threatening to strike against Japan. Cruiser ended up moving east, destroying 2 transports that he started with. Those are now off the east coast of Canada, putting them in range to potentially strike up in the Nordics or potentially France. Those would be good income, good long-term investments there. Anything else fun? Stacked his bomber in the United Kingdom and moved 2 fighters to land on his newly built carrier. Everything else just funneled into Canada. Those are loading onto the transport. Guys on the west coast didn't do nothing. So, okay. Good to know. So he's got 5 transports total, but he's unable to fill them yet with what he's showing. So that's okay for me. That tells me he might have some logistics problems coming up. Russia is going to be purchasing a tank. Interesting. Adds a little bit of firepower. It's more of an offensive move. For combat, they took everything they could into Ukraine. And they also took everything they could into Buryatia. I think that's going to be a mistake. Japan is going to be able to wipe that full stack out. Ukraine is understandable. Germany sitting in Karelia means I won't be able to really attack Ukraine. My reaction to this is going to be to ignore it. Because if he moves forward, that's actually going to make me really happy. I can stack on Archangel or West Russia, and he's actually going to be out of position to deal with my assault. So we're going to stick with the tried and true method. We are just going to build crap tons of infantry. And this is where I notice, oh, UK left their stuff in Egypt. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate this gift. Egypt was dead zoned pretty hardcore. So this is looking like Germany is going to have no trouble really just pulling anything. Had a brief moment of indecision deciding whether or not to send that infantry into Persia. Honestly, there's no armor there threatening to block off the Suez, so I'm just going to take the guaranteed, well, as close to guaranteed as possible, assault on Egypt. We're also going to dump our fighters on that weakened UK fleet. Here's a screenshot of those odds. Pretty good fight overall, I think. Looking pretty good. Tame combat. Don't really need to move forward against Russia. Just going to lock down Karelia. Battleship misses. That's okay. He's got a lot of friends. So, ironically enough, it felt like I had overpowering odds. I actually had barely enough to take that in one salvo. And he does hit 2 on the return. So while he did get fairly lucky, it's not lucky enough against overwhelming odds like that. Then we can move on to this fleet battle. Generally, I'm always nervous about throwing fighters against UK, but it is a substantially diminished UK fleet compared to what it normally would be. And we hit exactly what we should. And his defense oh no. Oh no. His defense profile is less than ideal for this fight. But I go for it anyway, and he hits again! So we have lost 4 fighters. That is crippling for Germany. That is ugly. That is terrible. And it makes me regret ever sending fighters against the UK fleet, no matter how diminished and weak and pathetic that UK fleet is. So that's going to take some recalibration as far as figuring out what our plan is for Germany, because that is painful. But oh well, that's dice for you sometimes. So now that I have 4 or fewer fighters, we actually do have to send some infantry back rather than forward, which is unfortunate. And we are actually, because he didn't take Karelia, we are going to put a fat stack on Belarusia. And then that is going to threaten Ukraine. I would suspect that he's going to want to push his stack south into the Balkans. If he does that, that's to my advantage, because I'm just going to keep moving forward. I'm going to get on West Russia, and then I get his industry or I get his capital. So we're just kind of dancing all the infantry forward, avoiding any kind of direct engagement for now. Right this moment, I'm just kind of deciding how many do I want to actually move forward. I could leave a stack of like 4 or 5, but I think ultimately Russia's going to come out ahead with any kind of direct conflict, so we're going to leave ourselves pretty naked here in Eastern Europe and the Balkans. And we're going to direct the bulk of our forces indirectly. Still forward, but not going to directly engage with his stack yet. Yes, this means that Germany is missing out on some income in the short term, but I think we should be fine. Guy on Libya or Algeria is going to stay right there so that we can block any US guys that land, and that should be pretty solid. I don't know if there's anything else Germany's even able to move this turn. Just giving them one last look. We do anything stupid? Probably. This is what I tend to do. Baltic states, got a hefty chunk there with an anti-air gun. Belarus is pretty healthy. Should be good. Use that industry that Russia thankfully under attempted to capture. He only took 1 infantry, lost it, and we'll just start producing on the front right away. Nice healthy stack. Tons of infantry shielding these tanks. Income's not much higher than it was at the start of the game, but there's a little closer look of how we stand right now. He cannot take me, but I can take him. Back to Japan. It is now round 2. Always check what the opponent did. In this case, he bought a carrier and 2 fighters. That is to replace what he lost last turn on Germany's turn. He also captured France with a tank and an infantry. Moved his submarine somewhere to assist the United States in trying not to die. Moved 2 fighters to Russia. Those are the ones from the south. And then dropped his bomber on United Kingdom. Now looking at this fleet, this is a pretty weak fleet again, but Germany's got no planes, so I'm not able to continually punish that because I lost too many in the last fight. So UK just keeps regenerating that fleet. Germany is unable to really keep that from doing anything. So for Japan's turn, we had a plan of taking India. We are not going to be able to pursue that plan. He was very aggressive with Russian infantry, so we are going to have to take those infantry out, build as many ground units as possible, while still getting just enough in the water to try and respect what he's got positioned in striking distance. So we will take a massive stack of 6 ground units plus a fighter plus a battleship shot, and we'll try and knock all those poor little Russian boys out. Meanwhile, we'll kind of scatter a little bit here on the front lines. Kind of debating, because Russia could always pull some tanks back. And I also have India as something I want, so just kind of, how am I going to distribute? I'm thinking I will take everything up into China. I think my goal will be to grab as much red territory as possible, and India will just have to be a secondary objective. It helps a little bit to ignore India here just because he's not buying anything on India. Yeah, it's not really a threat for me. Want to keep that transport out of range of these United States ships. So that should be just far enough that his fighters won't really be able to pursue me. You got 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. He's not able to reach me with his air force. He's got nothing on India that should be able to reach me. So that's a relatively safe location. My transport can just start churning out that little bit of extra income. Normally I'd think about taking him down to Africa, but it's looking like Germany's going to have a handle on Africa, and there's really not a whole lot that's needed to be done over there. So Japan is not going to really need to intervene there. Meanwhile, we need more air up on this stack of Russian boys, but I need to be mindful of how many spaces my fighters can move and where these fighters are going to have to land at the end of their turn. So I got to count spaces. It would be nice to have the German troops move up to West Russia and have 1 or 2 Japanese fighters to support. Those can make a really huge difference on defense. But I may or may not actually be able to do that. So I was thinking maybe I'd leave an infantry back, take what we've got. Now for the big fight, we have got pretty good odds to win this and definitely have both tanks left over. But only one good way to find out. Might get lucky. So far, not great. I hit kind of what's expected. He hits kind of what's expected. I hit a lot less than expected. He hits exactly what's expected. I hit a lot less than expected again, and he hits a little bit more than expected. So that ends up being not a great fight, but could have been much worse. Either way, clears off the whole Russian bloc and opens up everything else to blitzing. See how Australia goes. Looks pretty clean. That one I actually had worse odds on, but you know, sometimes dice are dice. Good clean combat move. Now I gotta figure out where all these ships are gonna end up, and right now the plan is make an impassable bastion, stack all of these ships up in one spot. A little bit of display error on the numbers. This is why I didn't move my other 3 fighters in to defend this, because if I were to bring those into the same assault, I would be unable to assist in defending the Navy. So I got to think about where I'm going to land the rest of these. Just counting some spaces. Would he be able to suicide some planes in? Maybe. So then we'll just fill up with the rest of it. That keeps a couple of planes in range to defend German stuff, if necessary. That maximizes my fleet potential. Looks pretty good overall. Yeah, that's not bad. Send it. Get that fleet just a little bit bigger. Battleship should be more than enough to handle a couple of stray fighters. And that is what we are going to call Japan's turn. Let's get a closer look at that Navy just so you can count the pieces. And back to Germany for round 3. Always check what your opponent did. In this case, we've got 3 transports, 5 infantry, 1 artillery, so more Navy. Unfortunately, he still doesn't have enough ground forces to use the transports he's already got, so probably over-investing a little bit in transports. USA is going to have some logistics issues. Taking the Philippines, that is that is a dead zone. Japan's got this massive fleet, this air force, everything is poised to strike. Thank you for your gift, United States. The sub and destroyer moved back. So that fleet is wiped out. Those infantry are wiped out. That's just a gift to the Empire of Japan. Everything else moved back to Russia. And then he moved up and stacked France. France is also a dead zone. It's one of the more confusing things. And shipped everything over. Okay. So we have an interesting choice. Looks like Russia did indeed move south, so we can attack Russia or we can attack France. And to me, that's an easy choice. We're going to press forward. Russia did, what did Russia do? 6 infantry, 2 artillery, and yep, that's it. They just took Bulgaria. So we are going to wipe out France and leave Russia alone. Because I'm going to build 10 more infantry, and there is no way in hell that Russia is going to be able to capture Germany without help. France is worth so much more, so we're going to keep Russia's giant stack way far away from their capital to defend. We're going to build our own pile of infantry, and we are going to advance. We're going to take West Russia. We're going to apply pressure directly to the capital and force Russia to regret getting so far out of their own territory. Because there's a lot of stuff they haven't dealt with. So we're going to drop 3 plus 13 plus 9. And that's looking like a pretty scary stack. And he's got 10 twos that won't be able to reach it because he's overextended. Meanwhile, we'll take all this other stuff on to France. Only real question is how many infantry to leave behind to feel comfortable against Russia. And what we've got here should be adequate. Meanwhile, we can get to work on taking Africa. Transport's only flanking rather than taking more stuff, just so that I can have a better angle no matter where that one UK infantry goes. I can take South Africa, and I really don't need to ferry anything else down here into Africa this turn anyway. So it's just a matter of positioning everything else so that I'm able to be a little bit more active with it. Tempted to take Ukraine to block the Bulgarian tanks from getting back to Russia in 2 turns, but I don't have any air support, so I'm unable to really make that happen. Now, if I still had 3 more fighters, it might work. So we got an easy combat here. Click, click, pull, baby. He does take one down with him, somehow. Somehow! And then we move on to the arguably closer battle, France. Now, this one is not nearly guaranteed. It's only maybe 90%. And I miss everything, so... well, he's not hitting everything either. He's hitting below average as well, so we'll keep going for it. Make up for it, so we're batting average. He misses that. Things are looking good. So that odds just got better. So this fight could have gone really badly, but ended up going pretty well. Awesome. So that actually, as far as the full spectrum, ended up being pretty hard in my favor, which is good. Yeah, it's nice to have the dice looking out for me occasionally. So he's not going to be able to bring a whole lot to counterattack. I might actually just bring a couple extra infantry, drop an anti-air gun there, just to discourage him from trying to retake it. We'll restack Germany here. We will disrupt his operations in the west. We'll block those tanks from blitzing through. Just get 1 infantry here, 1 infantry there. Nothing really for free. May or may not take the Baltic guys up to Karelia. May decide to bring them back. Had to think about that one for a bit. Although I could also put them on Belorussia, which would further prevent him from moving forward. Because Karelia is a good spot, but Belorussia would even prevent him from deciding, oh, you know, I am overextended, let me fall back to Ukraine. So he wouldn't be able to take that either. Weird little screen glitch there. Battleships just going to stay on this side of the strait. I mean, honestly, is more useful there. If he does decide to move his fleet south, the battleship could be a casualty and go and strike. Nothing's really threatening my transport right now. Next turn, my transport's probably going to move in. And I will just kind of fan out the infantry that I've got. Germany's gotten a nice, healthy income out of this. 6, 7, 8 IPCs out of Africa alone. And now I've moved everything that Germany's got to move, just checking to be sure I haven't missed something obvious. And that should be good. We will drop 10 more infantry on Germany. And that should make us pretty much untouchable, even with a 1-2 punch for a little bit. So that is a turn. Check our defense profile. If I do get hit twice, I want to be sure my AA guns do not get pulled off very first. That way they shoot against both factions. 10 more infantry. Yeah, probably just put one up here. Because, you know, UK could always just go after Karelia, and I need as much at home as possible. Cool. Very healthy income. Life is good for the Axis. Alrighty then. Back to Japan. Round 3. Time to do a little bit of cleanup. But first, what did UK do? We got 3 transports, 3 infantry, 1 arty. Took Morocco. Put the submarine somewhere else that is now trying to creep around, trying to take out my transport. I like that transport. And dropped everything on UK. Nothing mobilized to India. Interestingly enough, that's 2 turns in a row. Well, cool. So we're going to max out our infantry again, but that we have a lot of extra money to spend, so I think it is about time we purchased our first industrial complex, and we are going to slop that down on Manchuria. It's a pretty standard spot. We got to take care of that US fleet. There's nothing on Alaska. It's still got some logistics difficulties going over on that east coast. And we also got to clean up some red territory. That should be pretty easy. Japan is largely uncontested this game. So we're just going to blitz through, take everything. While we're at it, make sure that if he decides to blitz back, he can't just do tank on tank and completely cripple my lines. We're going to come into Kazakh heavy to try and tempt him into pulling 8 to 10 infantry off of Russia and giving Germany an easy capture of Moscow. Maybe he'll do it, maybe he won't. And we will grab the extra income where we can. Eat up Australia, take Madagascar. Madagascar, just set myself up for Brazil. While we're at it, we will take that lightly defended Alaska, which nothing will really be able to counterattack. And we'll bring just enough ships that we can comfortably defend ourselves against a sub and 2 destroyers. And we will take the rest of this navy down south to the Philippines. 1 carrier stays behind, is going to be needed for Alaska. Probably take 2 fighters to the mainland, 1 to the ocean. Probably take the bomber to the mainland too. It'd be mighty awkward if I lost that fight. I got plenty of planes to go around, but gotta remember Germany may or may not need some help. So we'll distribute these fighters in just a minute. Just locking down with ground forces, 2 infantry and 3 planes should be more than enough, and I should be able to transport the rest. over somewhere else, because I do want to take Alaska this turn. I also want to keep sending something, anything, over to the mainland. That's a pretty healthy fleet attacking, honestly. I shouldn't need a whole lot more fighters than that, especially since he moved his destroyer and subs back. I think getting those fighters on West Russia would be mighty nice. Decisions, decisions. We'll take one. Because losing that naval battle is just not an option. So we're gonna help ourselves everywhere we can, and only support Germany with one fighter. That should keep them pretty comfortable. Looks good. Tons of territory under assault here. Japan pretty much as uncontested as it can be. Very comfortable. And let's knock out this first combat. I expect this to go very one-sided. That helps. Easy peasy, man. Ooh. Oh well, we got 2 battleships. We can absorb that. Not going to spend our sub on anything else. So let's see if I get to keep the destroyer, shall we? Looks like the answer is yes. That is nice. That's always nice. 6 versus 61. Don't leave your navy in a dead zone. That is one lesson learned today. Don't leave anything in a dead zone. That's really been a recurring theme here. Hit with the bombard, didn't even need the fighter, but the fighter is going to help defend the carrier. Normally I wouldn't go for Alaska, but it's nice to force USA to build some ground on the west coast. Philippines, another one-sided battle. So long as he doesn't hit both, I'm really completely fine. And just a clean sweep. Lost 1 sub. That's it. So, life is pretty good for Japan these days, gotta say. So let's take care of the rest of this fleet. Get that fighter in the water. Destroyers with it. So we got destroyer, cruiser, carrier, 1 fighter. Let's make sure that any subs I've got are good. We are generally taking carriers before fighters. That's intentional. That will substantially improve our odds of winning on defense. Now, admittedly, I might be less cost effective if someone does just go for a stray for attack and retreat. But carriers defend at a higher value. So if he takes the carrier and retreats, then my fighter's just going to land on Alaska. Now, if you don't have a place to land, that's when you got to be careful. Now, these fighters aren't needed in the water anymore, so we are going to get them as close as we can to Russia with reasonable suspicion that they're not going to just get sunk. So I think India is our next objective here. We left the 1 fighter behind to reinforce West Russia. And sometime in the next 2 turns, I think, is when India is going to be very attractive. We'll probably take that Kazakh stack, and if he doesn't wipe it out, we'll just pivot it south to Persia, drop a bunch of units right there on Burma, and we will completely wreck India. Looks good. Send it. So we'll plop our industry down. Always tempting to put it down south, but Manchuria literally just produces more. And we will keep the ground units pumping. Pretty straightforward strategy overall. Just get as much ground as you can, and that income is huge. Let's go Axis. Time to see how things look for Germany. Lo and behold, my stack is still there. USA getting a battleship, cruiser, and destroyer. Interesting. No ground. Ended up taking Norway. That's largely expected. So, and he placed his ships on the west coast. Interesting. Okay, so that will completely disrupt his transports. He has 3 extra transports, no ground units to put on him, no ground units built, no ground units getting built. That's the transport situation is just no bueno here. Ultimately, I think U.S. would have been probably better off just putting enough ground units on the west coast. I could take those transports out with a German fighter or even a Japanese fighter later on, but what are they going to carry? The transports are no threat to me, so I'm just going to keep on keeping on. USSR got 7 infantry and 1 tank. Could have gotten 8 infantry, but presumably they didn't want to bother putting something on Caucasus, and they took Southern Europe, so just keep on creeping closer. I think the time has come to put the Soviet Union back in their place. The time has also come to purchase some artillery. I could get all infantry, but I'm kind of tired of feeling weak on my offenses, so just in case the battle against those Soviet guys doesn't go so hot, I will be able to retreat and pull everything back. We're going to take Caucasus Light so that we can still leave it as an option for Japan to take. Ideally, he trades it back and I can get the same income for the same territory twice in one turn. We will take literally everything else down to Southern Europe, spring a couple of tanks backwards to knock out Bulgaria. And even without those tanks on the front line, we should have no problem on defense. Then we can look to the rest of our income. We can snag Persia. And we should be able to knock this UK infantry out without any issue whatsoever. And snag some extra income. Money's good, man. Money's good. And then we'll bring the transport back up through the strait, and next turn that will allow us to take care of that other tank and infantry. He's got his own transport that could potentially start dropping. Maybe that's a concern. Got to just kind of sit back and reevaluate here. He's not able to reach South Africa, so we'll make sure what he can reach is less valuable. And if he does take something, I'll have my artillery still alive at least. So just a slight rearrangement there, given that his transport's going to be in range. What else are we doing? Other Germans will just come forward in non-combat. Keep the stack on West Russia. That's a pretty good fight. It's not guaranteed, but that's a pretty good fight. We'll do a roll or two. We'll see how it goes. Do the other combat first, just to be sure. But worst case, we'll just retreat. That went about as expected. No problem. And knock this little body out first. What you got? Nope. 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 Try again. There we go. And he's tagged one too. Oh well, it happens. And now, the big one. Yeah, it should be pretty fun. Could go really good, could go really bad, but I have the advantage. This is my fight to lose. That's above average. I am pleased with this result. That's above average. So here we take a step back, we reassess, and as it turns out, my above average is a little bit better than his above average, if only because I have so many more pieces in play. You've got 8 pips on his side versus 16 on my side. I have double his troop numbers, so even when there's comparable attack power, I have an edge. So let's carry on. Now we're just cleaning up. Well, there's one problem solved. Another favorable trade. Russia's entire army is missing. Berlin is completely safe. And Russia is in dire straits with literally no income. Income parity always favors the Axis. Just to be extra safe against some sort of Hail Mary, we're going to pull everything back to Berlin. Going to move the rest forward to West Russia. Get out of the way on Karelia. I'm not interested in trying to pursue a victory city snipe right this moment. I mean, we have the income advantage. Now, literally all we have to do is sit back and wait, and that's the game. Right now, Japan's just going to take India, iron that out, and Germany's just going to keep bulking up infantry until he resigns or I win. But we'll reassess on Japan's turn. Let's get some artillery back in the mix. One on the south, just in case we got to defend Africa. And one token infantry on Karelia. Very nice. $57 is really good. It's really good, actually. You know, if you're trying to kill Germany first and they're raking in 57 IPCs, you've got an uphill battle, to say the least. So here's our current war report. There is a 60 difference in attack power on the board. Income ain't looking so hot either. Once Axis gets above 90, it's definitely in my favor. So this should be a fairly straightforward game from here on out. Alrighty then, switching back to Japan, round 4. Things are looking pretty good, honestly. UK bought 8 infantry, only 8 infantry, and didn't put anything on India, yet again. So the ground war is on in earnest. They took Algeria, they took France. They took France with everything they had, which that's a dead zone territory. Germany's going to have no trouble retaking that at profit. So that's a questionable move. Meanwhile, repositioning their submarine, trying to get an angle on that transport still, so I'm going to have to keep scooting him out of the way. Sub's got a pretty wide range of motion overall. So that really does kind of disrupt me. That's one reason I like to buy destroyers early on as Japan. Just one, because you end up having rogue subs all over the place. I'd like to get myself around to strike Hawaii as well as India. That's my real goal. At this point, I think we need one more transport so that we can have 4 in the water and we can shuck 8 per turn out of Japan onto the mainland. Combat move? Null. Why do we need to do combat? We own the world. We have all income. So all we're going to do is wait for non-combat. We are going to reposition all our stuff to decisively take India. And then ideally we can set ourselves up to take Hawaii at the same time. And then we can just get a victory city win, maybe like round 5. That would be pretty sweet. So non-combat, just kind of sweep all these things south. Might as well take a couple extra with that transport as well. Because he does have some units on India. He does have 2 fighters still on Russia. Let's bring that stuff from Kazakh. We'll pivot that south to Persia, just like we already kind of had the idea that we would do. We'll take the bomber, another screen glitch. We'll take the bomber over to West Russia. 1, 2, 3. And we'll be able to start striking out any transports or even like lone destroyers or whatever that are going to make themselves all alone and tempting for my Japanese air. Do the Siberian slide south with Japanese infantry. Gets 1 more into Persia. Drop a fighter there for defense as well, just in case he does go all out and try to knock those things away. Transport keeps scooting. He'll go South Africa. His end goal is going to be just knock out Brazil, which coincidentally is going to really disrupt his transports even more because he's going to have to pull those out of the way to deal with that. Meanwhile, we only have to leave one infantry behind in Alaska to guaranteed hold it yet another turn or 2 or 3, so just more free income. And we'll keep that transport engaged in shucking as well, just transporting back and forth. Now, I was a little bit indecisive with my fleet here. My first thought was, hey, let's combine with the ships from the Philippines and make this really fat stack of boats that the US is going to have a hard time contending with, and we'll be able to just knock out the whole US fleet next turn as well. Ultimately, I'm going to decide against this, and this is just because of the quantity of fighters I have. I really want to take India first. Then I'm going to start thinking about Hawaii. And honestly, I'm going to need these fighters to attack India. And the more fighters that I have to dedicate to the side to keep this fleet from getting wiped, even on a small chance, like at this point, this guy's going to go into desperation mode and he's going to take riskier and riskier battles. If I offer him 25% or something to take out my fleet, he might go for it. He might win. And that's just not an acceptable outcome here. So ultimately, we are going to cancel this fleet movement. We're going to play a little bit more conservatively, even more conservatively than we've already played, and we're going to fall back, and we're going to play defensively. We're going to make sure that I have odds on India, that I can take a battleship shot, that I can take even more fighters, that the fighter I built can be one more square ahead. And so next turn, India. The turn after that, we're set up for Hawaii, and we should have a VC win by the end of round 8, VC being victory cities. So that is the plan. We should have no trouble executing. But step 1 is to have a plan, you know? So that is going to be really scary for India to just have these giant stacks of Japanese troops on either side. They won't have anywhere they can go, and there's nothing he can add to reinforce that's going to make that better. And every fighter he takes off to try and keep me from taking India is something off of Russia. So I'm just going to completely drill him if he does do that. So life is pretty good. Let's send it. Making sure there's nothing stupid here. If there is, I can't see it, but that doesn't mean it's not there. Locked in. I got one more transport. That's going to be the one we take to Hawaii. Get a couple artillery on these industries. Finally started using that Manchurian industry and getting stuff out there. She gone. And so begins what should be a very straightforward turn for Germany. USA got finally some ground units, but also 2 more transports. I mean, the USA has really got enough transports. They took Finland, and nice spurt of luck. They tried to take Karelia. They did not manage to take Karelia, so they were trying to take it light, but they missed twice, and I hit twice. So there you go. It's about a 1 out of 36 chance or so. Just kind of shuffling. Got tons of transports, but just nothing to put on them. 9 transports in the water and 2 more on the way. Huh. Overall, not all that intimidating. Go to Russia. They finally transitioned into infantry, so no artillery, no combat. So all they did was build 6 infantry and call that a turn. So no trading whatsoever. Didn't try to take Caucasus back. Didn't take any of those 2 territories. So we're going to get a bunch of artillery, because we're going to shift our whole stack over to Caucasus, and we're just going to start massing artillery and get ourselves odds on Moscow. Not now, but, you know, eventually. And we will try to take Finland back. I only got 1 infantry to send that way, but we've got fighters. This is what fighters are for. And since those 4 U.S. transports don't have anybody who can board them, we are just going to take France really heavy. reinforce Germany with the 11 guys that are still in southern Europe and start flexing our ability to keep him from taking that back. Snatch that last bit of income in Africa. And that's really all there is to go on here. Game says we got strong odds, and you know what? I believe it. So, hopefully this one goes alright. If he hits, I don't cap the territory. He hits, so I don't cap the territory. Finland's not that valuable to me, but it does keep him from transporting one more guy around. It does kind of limit his material. Meanwhile, France, I outnumber him pretty hard. I don't expect this to be a very hard battle. Still just got 8 infantry of cushion. My results are sub-average. His are pretty average. No huge swings on either side. That's about right. So I do unfortunately lose a couple more infantry than I was hoping for, but either way, I just have so many that I think I can afford this. I am not going to let him hold France. We'll go ahead, give another anti-air gun, protect ourselves from the Hail Mary. Let's reinforce Caucasus just a little bit more. I'm not sweating Africa because I don't want to put my battleship and transport in a position where he can easily knock them out with his fighters just yet. Maybe he'll go for it anyway, but I'd like his tank and infantry to move forward before I take him. So we'll slide all this junk over to Caucasus. Shouldn't really have to mess with those infantry at all. Fighters come back to Germany. It's a pretty versatile spot overall. Life is good. Nothing can attack Italy, so I don't have to sweat that. And I want to bring these guys to kind of a central position. Tank's going to be on Anglo-Egypt where he can really reach anywhere he needs to reach. He can go to Libya, he can go to West Africa, he can go to South Africa, he can go just about anywhere. Pretty clean. Pretty clean. Straightforward, like I said. Only reason I'm leaving 2 infantry on West Russia instead of 1 is so that UK is less likely to kill my Japanese planes. Looks about right. Cool. This game is nearing its conclusion, I am sure. So we dump our artillery. This one will go on Germany as well. Just in case he retakes France or Northwest Europe, we want to have enough there to ensure that those territories stay gray. That's all she wrote, and pass it back to UK, man. Back to Japan. As always, check and see what the other person did. Never know when they're going to pull a fast one on you. So we're going all ground. They did take Karelia. They dumped 8 infantry on Karelia. Swung their navy over to the Baltic. And that's about it. Didn't put anything on India, but then again, India is toast. As you recall, the plan is to annihilate India and all resistance there and set ourselves up for an attack on Hawaii next turn. Still building some fighters. I could potentially just keep building ground units or get another industry. I don't think this game's going to be long enough for an industry. So we're just going to take that money, and the 2 fighters will be able to help ensure that I can keep Germany safe as well as give me better odds on wiping the US fleet. We're going to detour battleship destroyer to wipe the UK sub. We're going to take the free US transport. We're going to take virtually everything else to India. This is way overkill. But overkill's the best kind of kill, god damn it. So that is how we will proceed. Everything else might be classified as non-combat. I guess we could go midway. Gets right up in his face. Blocks his movement for destroyer blocks. Encroaches on western United States. And could overall be a really strong move. It's the power play. We're gonna go with it. So, this should be a pretty straightforward battle. I may or may not lose an infantry. If he hits both, that's unfortunate, but this is a pretty clean battle for me. Yep. As expected. No problem. Let's knock this sub out real quick. We got one free hit on the battleship before anything happens, and sub only hits on a 1, so this is almost guaranteed. So, wiped out, no problem. Last but not least, let us conquer India. Should be a pretty one-sided battle. However, losing 2 fighters before the battle starts does make that a little bit more complicated. It's a good thing I've got so much and I hit nothing. Oh man. So, India battle starting off really bad. And then follows up with subpar, and he gets above average twice in a row after nailing 2 anti-air guns. But I just have so much. Even good luck can't save that. That's just... The dice gods were clearly favoring the UK. Look at that. 47-27. Not efficient at all. But that was just absolutely overwhelming odds. No way he could win that fight. Well, that cleans up that last pocket of resistance. So let's get this transport out somewhere. I'd like to have 2 different transports from 2 different directions coming at Hawaii. Question is which one? Armor can shuffle. I don't think Russia is going to come out anytime soon. But just in case they do, I mean, it's nice to have this follow-up, and eventually Japan's going to have a big enough army that they could start thinking about taking on Russia. I mean, my income right now is pretty insane. So this is just about trying to end the game. So you can send that transport out. He'll be able to pick up an infantry and attack Hawaii from the other side. And keep the ferry going. So that gives us 2 transports approaching Hawaii. That gives us a big naval block right next to Hawaii. That gives us a massive bastion on Caucasus. That gets us India. This is looking good, to say the least. We're 2 victory cities away. All we got to do is lock down Karelia. We can put our defense profiles back, and we should be okay. Nothing else I'm able to move, really. So we'll just call that a turn for Japan. As we bring this game to a steady close. The squeeze of death. No sense in attacking the capital if I don't have to, right? Boring, but incredibly effective. Yay for infantry. Let's just take a closer look at that fleet. We are good. That's what we're looking at on the capital. Map is fair. Back to Germany. As always, United States. 1 battleship and 3 submarines. No ground. And they go to the west coast. Interesting. Okay. So he's just going to try and outmoney Japan in a head-on fight. He retook Brazil. It's kind of expected, but that pulls his stuff out of the way. And he retook Alaska, sent 2 tanks up there, lost 1 against my infantry, but still captured it. Russia built 1 fighter and just plopped it down and said, that's my turn. Now, fighters are still less cost-effective than infantry, even on defense. They have better combat value, but the idea that you have fewer pips is always, always, always going to be to your disadvantage. So once again, we're going to buy as if we're just trying to kill Russia. But our real motive here is to just lock down victory cities. I can't retake Karelia right this second. Oh, but I want to. So we are going to have to position ourselves in such a way that we can hold France, take Karelia next turn, because Japan is going to have no issue capturing Hawaii right now. They have no blockage. So, should be clean. Try and coax his tank forward, see if we can't knock that out too. Actually, I could probably just drop. Yep. Africa is solidly under German control. No one, including the United States, is doing anything to try and change that. And let's move the stack. You know, ultimately you got 7 U.S. transports, but what are they going to transport? Just United States continually not buying any ground units is really giving Germany a lot of freedom of movement here to do basically whatever I want. So I'm going to abandon France for now. I am going to retake it in force next turn, but this is just to give me a fat stack next to Karelia and to prevent any kind of shenanigans from United Kingdom of going for Berlin. Yeah, by the end of this turn, I should have enough that next turn, round 7, I will take both Karelia and France, iron out the victory cities, and that will be that. There will be no coming back from that. Cool. And I'll keep my big stack where I've already got it. Just pushing some tanks to the side to guarantee that I will be able to take those to Karelia, because if Russia does trade West Russia, then I can't blitz my tanks through. So I brought some tanks back so I'd be able to use those in the fight to ensure that France, Karelia, those are mine next turn. Caucasus at this point truly is expendable, but I want that to remain enough of a threat that Russia doesn't come off to defense. Let's end this. Japan. Round 6. UK got all ground. I mean, they really can't afford much anymore, so they're unable to fill their transports, but it's kind of the point. It's what Africa's good for. So they retook France, they retook it heavy. They left their US fleet naked, so Japan could potentially just run in and sink that US fleet 1, 2, 3 and land on Germany. And they moved all their infantry over to Archangel. So, anything else fun? They put their fighters on Russia. And that's about it. So that plays right into my hands. This should be Japan's second to last turn. Now, US bought a whole bunch of Navy before, and they're actually able to take me on in a head-on engagement. So we will not take Hawaii this turn, but we'll guarantee ourselves to take it next turn. Round 7 will be the last round, if everything goes according to plan and the dice play it easy. We'll be able to bring in our own battleship and destroyer off Australia to come in and assist in the culling. Meanwhile, let's get ourselves some more free money. We'll be able to pick up the infantry on the Solomon Islands if we do lose one on our way to Hawaii, so no trouble there. That's also just out of range of all their ships since he has no aircraft, well, at least no aircraft in the West Hemisphere. Those will be completely safe from counterattack, but will still be attacking Hawaii. We can shift back over here. I think we will knock out that US fleet. It's not really doing anything, but we can, and it makes me feel good. We'll also just go ahead and take Karelia with Japan. That has the added advantage of being able to drop German fighters to assist in the defense if and when UK does a one all-out desperate defensive. And that should be it. So we'll just knock out New Zealand real quick. Further cascade this income advantage in my favor. At this point, I'm probably getting around 20 more pieces per turn than he is. And swing back over here. And try and clean up this fleet. Oh! Well, that's not ideal. Well, let's give it a shot. One more. Alright, so he hits 2. That is less than ideal. Somebody remind me, don't send Axis planes against ships. They will always hit you, and it's never worth it. So, I just did that because I thought it was fun, and I lost 2 more fighters. Oh well. Meanwhile, we'll just get this big pile moving up. I mean, there's the off chance that somehow, some way, he pulls something out of a hat, but this should be wrapping up. We'll get the rest of our Japanese guys on Shenking so that they are any other shenanigans that go on. Maybe the UK 8 infantry move it east another slot and just try to start reclaiming income for Russia. We're going to have enough in place to just say, nope, not happened in this game. Then I got this whole fleet to contend with. I think we fall back 1 space. Actually 2 is probably better. And we'll hold up right here. Just out of range of the US fleet. Now he could potentially destroyer block me or something. But he's only got 2 destroyers, so kind of no matter what he does, I'm going to be able to really prevent him from keeping me from taking Hawaii. But we will see if he notices what I'm going for here or not. So I got that big pile, move him over. I'm coming at Hawaii from 2 different angles. It's pretty much everything I can do, so we'll call it quits right there. Stupid check. Should be safe. Just getting a little bit more fleet. If he decides to move forward, if he wants to chase me, whatever, I will end him. I've got too much money. Japan is unstoppable compared to USA. Here we go. 1 more round. Germany, probably the final round. As usual, let's check what these people did. Ground units? What? There we go. So, and they did end up taking their transport down to South Africa, but I don't care. I think this is going to be our last round. We're just making sure there's no shenanigans that are going to prevent us from clutching this out. He's not using his fighters to defend France. He's got no infantry follow-up yet again. Russia did finally get just 3 more infantry. Just plant them on Russia. Doesn't want me taking the Soviet Union. Okay, I don't want to take the Soviet Union. I mean, it'd be nice if I could, but I don't want to. That's not my goal right now. We are going to take France. We are going to take Karelia. We are going to take Hawaii. That's it. So there's only 2 victory cities to go, and right now, Hawaii is guaranteed. I got 2 transports. He's out of position to stop me. So this is it. All I have to do is hold France, Karelia, and Germany. So we are going to buy as though that's all we have to do. We get 2 fighters because fighters are better at defense. They're cost ineffective as crap, but if you can only place 10 pieces, fighters are better than infantry. We are also going to completely ignore our Africa income. Because once again, all I have to do is hold France. We're not going to take all our infantry because we do still have to worry about, potentially losing Berlin to a Hail Mary. But that should be all we need to do. Everything else we've got is just going to migrate over to Karelia. And that'll be the game. This is a pretty strong Ardennes offensive going on right here. He's only got 6 pieces. Oof. He deserved 2 hits there. So here we go. We'll land our fighter on Berlin. And we'll kind of split our tanks around. Be sure we've got enough defending everything. But the goals remain the same. I could take a whole bunch more into West Russia, but it's kind of pointless. We'll just do that. I can land the fighter there because Japan took it. And Japan's turn, they'll be able to put 2 more infantry on it. 8 out of 9 victory cities. And all Japan needs to do is take Hawaii, and that is game over. UK should not be able to in any way retake France or Karelia, and Soviet Union's not going to be able to move again. So it's entirely on US. US cannot take Hawaii, so the only way he can survive is for United Kingdom to take one of those, and it just doesn't have enough pieces. So that should be GG. Just making sure he can't take Italy. Nope, he can't, so we're solid. And sure enough, that is the game. So did not get to take Hawaii with Japan, but I think he saw the writing on the wall and just went ahead and forfeit the game. So didn't really have many ways to come back from that, but here's your final board state. I would say that there was one primary mistake being made that game, and that was giving up favorable trades, in the sense of you had the English force on Egypt that was traded away early for a profit to Germany. You had the US fleet on the Philippines that was given away for a profit very early. You had the Russian force that was on southern Europe that was given away fairly early at a profit. You had repeated trading of France, where there was just more stuff dropped than really needed to be dropped to take the territory, and Germany was always freely able to capture it back at a profit. So it's just all these little battles over time where Germany's allowed to take something or Japan's allowed to take something and not really lose anything in the process of pulling your pieces off the board, that's something where you need to avoid the fight entirely, um, or focus on having more there. So I think the refusal to disengage, kind of like I did on Karelia on Germany's second turn or whatever it was, where Russia put out a whole bunch of tanks and I had to GTFO, or Russia would have had a profitable battle on Germany and would have just pulled all of Germany's pieces off the board. So there is a right time to retreat, and I think that alone would have substantially evened this game out. So that'll be our takeaway from today. Anyway, GG. I had fun. Hopefully you did too. Thanks.